Hello and welcome to Making It Political. I'm Zach, and today I'm flying solo to introduce this new sub-series explaining the different political ideologies. Over the course of this series, I will discuss the traditional ideologies of conservatism, liberalism, and socialism, before concluding with nationalism. In today's episode, I will be delving into the historical beginnings of conservatism and going over the core ideas and principles of traditional conservatism, the first strand of the ideology. The first question to address is, what is conservatism? In its simplest terms, it is the suspicion of change, specifically that of rapid change. The ideas first arose in reaction to the pace of change surrounding the French Revolution in the late 1700s. Conservative thought has varied wildly. UK conservatism draws heavily from the writings of Edmund Burke, who first advocated the idea of change to conserve. Therefore, new changes can be introduced whilst also protecting traditional institutions. On the other hand, the USA has previously been influenced very little by conservative ideas. However, in the 1960s, conservative views began to be expressed within the major parties. It is less easy to identify conservatism outside of Europe and America. In Africa, Asia, and Latin America, political movements developed to preserve traditional ways of life, but they have not employed specific conservative values. The exception to this rule is the Japanese Liberal Democratic Party, or LDP, which has dominated politics in Japan since 1955. The LDP is committed to a healthy private sector, whilst at the same time preserving traditional Japanese culture by supporting conservative values such as hierarchy. Conservatism has undergone major changes since its conception, with strands of the ideology appearing such as One Nation conservatism, which took an unusual interest in the lower classes, and New Right conservatism, that emerged through the UK's Thatcher government from 1979 to 90, and the Reagan administration in the USA from 1981 to 89. Before delving deeper into these changes, however, we must first discuss the traditional values of conservatism, beginning with human nature. Conservatives see human beings as both imperfect and imperfectible. This is expressed in three key flaws of humans. Firstly, humans are viewed as psychologically limited and dependent due to a fear of isolation and instability. This leads people to be drawn to the safe and familiar and have security. The desire for security has led conservatives to emphasize the importance of social order. Order ensures human life is safe and predictable in an unpredictable world. This can lead to some conservatives being prepared to sacrifice liberty for that social order. Secondly, humans are viewed to be naturally immoral. Conservatives hold a pessimistic view of human nature and believe humankind is innately selfish and greedy, echoing the English philosopher Thomas Hobbes's belief that obtaining power is the primary human urge. This means crime is the result of basic human instinct, and the only way to encourage civilized behavior is through deterrence, namely the law. The principle is seen in the preference of conservative governments to be tough on crime with harsher punishments. Law upholds order. Finally, humankind is seen to have limited intellectual powers. Conservatives believe the world is too complicated for human reason to understand. In the words of Michael Oakeshott, the political world is boundless and bottomless. This has resulted in a suspicion of abstract ideas that seek to explain the incomprehensible. Conservative ideas are grounded in tradition, experience, and history, and a pragmatic or practical approach to the world. This means political principles such as human rights, equality, and social justice are seen as dangerous as they provide a blueprint for the remodeling of the world. The belief of humans being dependent creatures implies that they cannot exist outside of society. The individual must be part of the social groups that nurture them, such as family, friends, colleagues, the local community, and even the rest of the nation. These groups provide security, and due to this, traditional conservatives refuse to understand freedom in negative terms, where individuals are left alone to suffer from isolation. In a conservative mindset, freedom is the willing acceptance of social obligations and doing one's duty, as duty and obligation are what hold society together. This view of society is often referred to as organicism. The distinction between an organic society and a mechanical one is important. Firstly, unlike machines, organisms are not made of parts that can be arranged at will. The whole is more than the individual parts. This applies to society in the sense that the whole is sustained by fragile relationships that, if damaged, could bring down the whole system. Secondly, the organic society is fashioned by natural necessity. For example, the idea of family is a product of natural social impulses. The organic metaphor also explains the emphasis conservative thinkers place on tradition and hierarchy. With tradition, it is believed it generates a sense of identity. Established customs are familiar and reassuring. Tradition also represents the accumulated wisdom of the past. The institutions and practices that have stood the test of time should be preserved for the benefit of generations to come. This reflects the Darwinian belief that these institutions have survived because they work and are valuable. They've survived due to being the most fit, in this case for purpose. The principle of hierarchy also links to the organic assumptions. Like each organ has a role to play in the body, each social class has a role to play in society. There must be leaders, workers, and everything in between. Traditional conservatives therefore believe there is a natural inequality of wealth and social position. This is justified by the corresponding inequality of responsibilities. With the state, traditional conservatives have a view that it is rooted in authority. Authority develops naturally, for instance with children and parents. In this sense, authority is imposed from above, as the children have not agreed to be governed. This idea of natural authority extends to the relationship between society and the government. Due to this, conservatives place a special emphasis on the capacity of the state to lead society. Leadership is vital as it provides direction and inspiration for others. Traditional conservatives see political judgment and the capacity to inspire as natural gifts or the products of a privileged family or educational circumstances. This view has led some thinkers to embrace the idea of a natural aristocracy. The stress on leadership and privilege helps explain why conservatism came around slowly to the idea of democracy. The need for leadership did create a pro-state tendency within the ideology. This can be seen in the USA, where a tradition of strong state conservatism was established after the presidency of Theodore Roosevelt between 1901 and 1909, which was reflected in an insistence that no private interest should be stronger than the US state. However, these tendencies have been countered by the deeper fears of over-government within the ideology. It is worried the state will become a self-serving monster or leviathan that interferes in every aspect of life. The conservative stance on the economy is primarily concerned with the defence of private property. Property reflects merit. Those who work hard and possess talent will accumulate wealth, and so acts as an incentive. Traditional conservatives link property with psychological and social advantages. For example, it provides the security people seek. Those with property are also more likely to respect the property of others. Having a stake in society makes people more likely to respect law and order. However, some conservatives also believe that having property rights entails obligations. Property is of importance to society as it will cut across generations. Much of the property today has been passed down from earlier generations. The present generation is then custodian of the nation's wealth and have a duty to preserve it for future generations. Now then, to sum this all up, today we have covered the origins of the conservative ideology, as well as the ideas and principles of traditional conservatism. Next time I do one of these ideology minisodes, we'll be covering One Nation conservatism, which should be a shorter episode than even this. Until then though, I would like to thank you all for listening to this episode of Making It Political. See you all next time.